Now, we've been at this equal education system since 1954, okay, with the Brown decision. Brown v. Board, okay, Supreme Court of the United States ruled that separate is by definition unequal. And then the nation sets out to pursue an equal education system in every part of our system. Here's some data for us on 6+ decades of an equal education system. All we did was control for one thing. We controlled for income. So this is the high school graduation map for middle and high income children. And it probably doesn't shock anybody, because it's no surprise that middle income and high income kids do pretty well in U.S. public schools. That's the corresponding map for low income kids. And if that is not a national crisis, pray tell what is. And I know what y'all are thinking. Texas? Texas cheats. No, for real. For real. You don't remember the Texas miracle and the Texas state superintendent? Yeah, look it up. Hey? It wasn't no miracle. It was, unless cheating's a miracle. Tip to finish, edge to edge, coast to coast. Poor kids are failing in incredibly high numbers in our schools. And that's not even coding for race. Because you know what happens when we add race to that formula. This is the Global Peace Index. The Global Peace Index is considered by many around the world as the gold standard for measuring peace and democracy in societies. Something that the so-called global leader in democracy would probably want to score well on. Okay, the Global Peace Index is used by the United Nations, it's used by the World Health Organization, it's used by UNESCO to measure the quality of peace and democracy in societies all over the world. In 2015, every time I show this slide, the same thing that's happening now happens, which is people stop looking at me and they start looking at the rankings. Because the US is obsessed with rankings. No, we did not make the top 15 in 2015. We were 94th. The 2018 index just came out, and now we're 121st. This is the impact of 6 decades of an equal education system in a radically unequal society. 1854, London, England. There was talk of total collapse of the city because there was a massive outbreak of cholera. And in a last-ditch effort to save the city officials sequestered some of the top medical minds in London. They put them in a room, locked them in, and said, "You're not coming out of here until you have a solution for cholera." So all these doctors are sitting around a table and they're knocking around all these ideas, and eventually one of them stands up. He says, this is absurd. They say, "What do you mean?" He says, "Every single solution we're coming up with defaults us to cholera. We're not trying to figure out how to end cholera. We're not trying to figure out how to eradicate cholera. We're trying to figure out how to live with cholera." And they said, "Yeah?" And he said, "I didn't sign up to be a medical doctor to live in the conditions of sickness. I signed up to be a medical doctor to create the conditions of wellness." They said, "Well, you're not being realistic. You're not looking at the data." And I hear this said to teachers, school leaders, superintendents all the time that are talking about fundamental shifts in the way in which we move in schools. Not lipstick on the pig, not tweaking around the edges, not calling block scheduling as some massive innovation in schools, right? But saying, no, we need to fundamentally rethink what the hell are we doing here? Why are we taking children from their families at age 6 for 13 consecutive years for 8 hours a day. What is this project about? What is the fundamental purpose of public education in this pluralistic, multiracial democracy? Is it really test scores? For real? That's what we're about. Or is it something fundamentally different? Our unwillingness to revisit that foundational question leads us to keep tinkering around the edges on a ship that all of the data suggests is rapidly sinking. So this medical doctor, amongst the top medical minds in London, speaks a similar story. And he says, if that's what it means to be part of your medical association, to adhere to principles that are clearly making us sick, then I don't want to be part of your medical association. These top medical minds looked back at him and said, cool. And showed him the door. This medical doctor's name was John Snow. John Snow leaves the meeting of the top medical minds in London and he hits the streets. And he becomes an ethnographer of the community that he served. The best teachers, the best school leaders that I'm around are first and foremost ethnographers of the communities that they serve. They're embedded in the barrio. They're embedded in the neighborhoods that they're serving so that they know that what they're actually giving to children and families is a direct response to the material conditions of their lives, not what's most convenient for the school or the district or the state. So John Snow hits the streets. He starts collecting data. And he interviews as many people as he could that had cholera. And he interviews as many people as he could that didn't have cholera. And what John Snow found is a researcher's dream. He found causal, a perfect binary in his data. What John Snow found is that every single person in London that had cholera drank from that water fountain. And every single person that didn't. So John Snow got a saw, and he cut the handle off, and cholera stopped. Stop drinking from the poison well of an equal education system. There is simply no data that suggests that it has us on the path to a pluralistic, multiracial democracy. And in point of fact, all the data suggests that it's moving us rapidly away from that. So if you're data-driven, then pay attention to the data, and you'll know that equity is the right move.